Good evening. Welcome to the July 7th edition of the Downers Grove Village Council meeting. As is our tradition, please join us in saying the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Welcome. Welcome to all my colleagues this evening. We apologize for a little bit of a late start, a few minutes, as is the case. You can see things continue to evolve in the COVID world. We had a little audio difficulty. We hope we've got at least enough to get this meeting on record appropriately. With that, Megan, would you please call the roll?
Commissioner Jose?
Here.
Commissioner Earl?
Here.
Commissioner Wallace?
Here.
Commissioner Sadowski-Freeman?
Here.
Commissioner Palomini?
Here.
Commissioner Gray?
Here.
Mayor Barnett?
Here. We are all in attendance. That's great. And we're in council chambers. For those that are watching at home, this is good to be back. Due to the COVID-19 pandemic, we are going to continue to take comments electronically through the course of the meeting. For those that are uncomfortable coming into council chambers, and we have limited room at that, submitting a comment, please click the Submit Public a Comment link on the current week's meeting page of the village website anytime during the meeting. As with previous council meetings here in council chambers, there are copies of the agenda on either side of the room. And for those watching at home, the agenda, as well as links to all the documentation we have here on the dais, can be found on our website at downers.us. In the lower left-hand corner, just follow the link to this week's meetings. With that, is there a motion concerning previous council minutes?
Mayor Barnett, I move that the council adopt the June 16, 2020 minutes as presented.
Second.
Any comments or questions? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? It carries unanimously. Thank you. Item 4 on tonight's agenda is the mayor's report. We have a resolution concerning boards and commissions. Megan, would you please read that?
A resolution appointing members to the Transportation and Parking Commission. Whereas Mayor Barnett has made the following appointments to the Transportation and Parking Commission. Now therefore be it resolved that the Village Council of the Village of Downers Grove does hereby confirm the following appointments. Transportation and Parking Commission. Appoint Christopher Serretz to a 1-year term expiring August 31st, 2021. Appoint Jeremy Shalivan to a 2-year term expiring August 31st, 2022. Appoint Allison Heverin to a 3-year term expiring August 31st, 2023.
Thank you, Megan. One of the challenges of boards and commissions has always been the appointment process and the idea of transition, allowing a diverse and changing group of residents to serve our community. To that end, I want to thank Commissioner Earl in particular this time around for her help with the Parking and Traffic Commission appointments this evening. I really appreciate her help in the process, and she's helped guide a reasonable transition to accomplish both the goals of a good and solid committee with some history and capability, as well as giving some new folks a chance. Thank you. Commissioner Jose?
Mayor Barnett, I move that the council adopt a resolution appointing members to the Transportation and Parking Commission as presented.
Second.
Any comments or questions? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? That carries unanimously as well. Thank you. Item 5 on tonight's agenda is our first opportunity for public comments. This is the portion of the meeting we reserve for anybody who's got something they'd like to bring to our attention or comment on that is not on tonight's agenda. When we hit each agenda item, we will have additional opportunity for public comments. So come on down to the microphone.
I couldn't resist.
Good to see you, David.
Sorry I didn't have the opportunity to print out anything, but I think I'm close to the 5-minute time frame. Can you hear me okay? Yes. I wanted to talk on the question, do Black Lives Matter? Protests around the world encourage each of us to address this pertinent, long-standing question. Will we answer it this time any differently than we've answered it in the past? I appreciate seeing that members of the Downers Grove Police Force did not riot, and in fact, some took a knee in response to protesters' requests. I welcome this council doing a much better job in the future than it has done in the past of informing residents about the department's funding, policies, practices, and performance. However, the need for improvement and remedy extends well beyond the police department. Do Black Lives Matter? If we're honest, the answer is no, not in Illinois, not when, to name again one prominent example, the state of Illinois continues its policy of funding K-12 education unequally and inadequately. How do we know this is the policy? Because the evidence-based formula on which the state's contribution to education is currently based identified at the time the law was passed an annual shortfall in adequately funding the state's K-12 education schools of $8 billion. That's B, billion with a B. And that does not include, hold on a second, capital spending, which means the state's commitment to increase its education spending by at least $350 million a year is relative to the need a drop in the bucket. The shortfall exists because the state's heavy reliance on property taxes to pay K-12 education leaves property poor districts way underfunded. Not surprisingly, the size of the gap was not publicized at the time the legislation was being considered and has received little attention since its passed. How is that gap to be filled? Not by doing anything that prevents additional monies from being spent in property-rich districts such as Downers Grove. That omission, of course, only makes the problem worse. Here's the connection to this group. Over the years, members of this council, including mayors, have regularly asserted maintaining property values in the village is one of the council's primary objectives, perhaps objective number one. Which begs an obvious question. If the principal Illinois policy helping maintain property values in Downers Grove is the state's endorsement of unequal and inadequate funding of schools, then this council, the village's school boards, and all its various taxing bodies are implicitly saying Black Lives Matter, just not that much. Certainly not as much as property values matter. The residents of Downers Grove and their taxing bodies like unequal funding of schools because it raises property values. Because people with children who want to live in a district with decent, adequately funded schools will pay to live in those districts, which also makes the problem worse. And if that means children living in property poor districts are left behind, black, brown, white, yellow, purple, whatever color those children may be, well, so be it. We're safely ensconced here in Downers Grove heaven. Reliance on property taxes collected locally and spent strictly locally in the local school district is one of our state's and the nation's most effective ways to perpetuate inequality in education and beyond. It becomes dramatically obvious this arrangement does so when one compares the present system to a system in which both the level of funding required for adequacy, where adequacy is defined using an evidence-based formula such as Illinois now uses, and the taxing of property to provide that funding are determined by aggregating across the state. It's simple math. After one computes totals on each, it's a simple calculation to determine the single tax rate required on each of the state's properties to generate the revenue needed to fund adequately each of the state's schools. Why isn't this done? Because the people living in property-rich districts don't want their taxes spent in a way that eliminates the school funding inequality that helps maintain and raise their property values. They don't want equitable or adequate school funding. Of course, people in property-rich places like Downers Grove will tell you, with all the sincerity they can muster, they believe in equality of opportunity. However, as I have said in the past and say again today, the reality is they do so in theory so long as they don't have to pay for it in practice. The more liberal-minded individual may tell you, I wish every school in the state could be as good as those in Downers Grove. Fine, if you're sincere, define that as your level of adequacy, and do the math as described above to figure out the property tax rate required to make it happen. What other path is there? So to all those who support the peaceful protesters but pluck their tongues and shake their heads at the looters and rioters, I say this. Compare the property damage they did to the quiet damage done daily through the neglect perpetrated by unequal and inadequate funding of education for months, years, and decades past, and those still to come. The violence of the latter is not as immediately visible, but I would argue it's far more damaging and long-lasting. And you don't even have to leave the comfort of your living room to do it. If Black lives really matter, if all lives really matter, the residents of Downers Grove, along with all the citizens of Illinois, will not tolerate continued inadequate, unequal funding of K-12 education. we will not tolerate the slow walk toward funding adequacy Illinois has adopted. Indeed, I will say further, if all lives really matter, I challenge government leaders and citizens alike to investigate whether the notion of an evidence-based formula can and should be applied to determine adequacy and funding levels for every aspect of government services: police, fire, water, sanitation, parks, roads, social services, administration, you name it. Property-poor communities struggle to adequately fund everything. Property-rich communities, by contrast, struggle to keep up with, stay ahead of their neighboring communities' spending. It's a societally self-destructive arrangement that fuels worsening inequality. Do Black Lives Matter? Do all lives matter? Not now, not in Downers Grove, not in Illinois, not by a long shot. So what do we do about it? Since you, council, claim to be leaders in this community, my question is, are you courageous enough to take on these issues? I heard the heartfelt and concerned words you uttered in June. Are you ready to put your political energy where your voices were?
Thank you, David. David, would you do me a favor and email that to us? There's a lot there to digest, and being an entity that's not involved in determining how schools are funded or taxing to fund them or any of that, there's probably stuff to be gleaned, but it's going to be tough without the written version. Thank you for that. Any other additional public comments? Looks like we have none. So we'll move on to consent agenda. Is there a motion concerning tonight's consent agenda?
Mayor Barnett, I move that the council adopt the consent agenda as presented.
Second.
Any comments or questions on the consent agenda tonight? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? It passes unanimously. Thank you. Item 7 on our agenda tonight is our active agenda. This is the portion of the meeting where we discuss items on which we plan to take action this evening. We have none tonight, so we're going to move right on to our first reading. The first reading portion of the meeting is where we discuss items that we will not act on tonight. These are typically the first or sometimes second or third time we've studied a subject or discussed it, but there'll be no direct action taken on tonight's first reading items. Dave?
Thank you, Mayor. There are 6 items on tonight's first reading agenda. The first 2 deal with the property of St. Mary of Goston Parish and School and their zoning request. Here to present background information on these items is our Community Development Director, Stan Popovich. Stage right.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. Thank you, Manager Fieldman. As Manager Fieldman noted, this is a rezoning and institutional master plan request for St. Mary's of Goston at 440 Prairie Avenue. St. Mary of Goston is located on the east side of town, just north of the railroad tracks along Fairview Avenue there. The campus is shown on this map, consists of multiple parcels, principally at the intersection of Douglas and Prairie. What the trigger is for tonight is happening here at the southeast corner of Gears in Douglas. The church is proposing to demolish an existing house that's on this property here outlined in green and construct a new playground, paved playground area at this location. This is the image of the proposed playground here in the foreground that would tie into the existing playground that's north and then tie into the school that is immediately south as well. The school received approvals in 2018 to expand the school building, which is on the light green shaded area on the north side of Prairie Avenue, with a new gymnasium addition that is completed here on the east side of that campus there. At that time, St. Mary's rezoned the church parcel, which is on the south side of Prairie Avenue, and the school parcels to an institutional number 1, so it's an INP 1 zoning classification. But they didn't rezone all the properties at the time because they weren't sure exactly what they were going to do with the rest of those properties. So at this time, what they're proposing to do with the playground has triggered these requirements to rezone all to an INP 2 zoning district. That's principally because the INP 1 zoning district is limited to 4 acres in size, and the proposed use is at 4.28 acres in size. So that's what's triggering the rezoning. So all of this area will be rezoned to an INP 2 zoning classification there as well. And with the INP 2, then a master plan is required. So this is the plan that they're showing, which hasn't changed anything other than calling out the playground area where there was a single family home there. So it's still the church on the southeast corner of Douglas and Prairie, the school buildings on the north side of Prairie, and then the playgrounds there on the north side of the school. The comprehensive plan notes that the village should continue to support these type of uses, minimizing impacts on the neighborhoods, and again, continuing with high quality facilities. The Plan Commission found their essential June 22nd meeting that these standards for approval for the rezoning and institutional master plan are met. If there's any questions at this time, I'd be happy to answer those for you guys.
Thank you, Stan. Anybody got any questions on the council at this point? Anyone in the audience want to speak to this? It's not required.
I have one question. I don't know if it's for you or for the petitioner. When the original petition was approved for the school, there was a concern raised at the Plan Commission with a resident to the east that they were having some stormwater problems. I know the church did a lot to mitigate that and store stormwater on site, but I wonder if that has been properly remediated, if we've had any other complaints like that.
Yeah, so that was during the permitting process there. There was a concern about some of the stormwater, specifically the parcel on the north side of Gray Avenue, just to the right of the red box there. So the stormwater, there's a post-construction best management practice that's been installed on the east side of the church, and on the east side of the school gymnasium addition, and that's alleviated the stormwater concerns. So it's principally during construction there was some water that was just heading off site that because it wasn't finished yet.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Stan. Thank you, Rich. A little distraction there with sound. Anybody else have any other questions or comments? I'll just add that, first of all, I'm a big fan of the INP process, and I hope those that are engaging it feel like it's helpful to them. And then thank you to St. Mary's for continuing to invest in our community. Anytime a resident or a business or another entity chooses to reinvest or expand their investment in Downers Grove, it's a good thing for our whole community, so thank you for that. All right, moving on. Dave?
Thank you, Mayor. I would take the next 3 items as a group. As part of our response to this pandemic, the Village of Downers Grove extended the deadline for renewing liquor licenses and massage therapy licenses. We amended outdoor dining permit procedures and liquor provisions, and we stayed late payment penalties for utility bills, parking citations, and food and beverage taxes. All necessary actions in regard to the economic impacts of the virus. The ordinances and resolutions here before you tonight would do the following 4 things. Number 1, establish November 1st as the annual renewal date for liquor licenses on a permanent basis. Number 2, establish September 1st as the annual renewal date for massage licenses on a permanent basis. Number 3, extend the outdoor dining and related liquor provisions to November 1st or November 15th, depending on weather conditions at that time. And finally, number 4, reinstate late payment penalties as of September 1st for utility bills, parking citations, and food and beverage tax payments. We're happy to answer any questions the council may have about these actions.
Thank you, Dave. Council comments or questions? Rich? Oh, I'm sorry, Greg?
That's all right. Thank you, Mayor. No questions, it's just a comment. I think at this point, while the state and obviously our village are beginning to reopen, it's important that we start to put some markers out there. Businesses thrive on and require certainty. And I think it's important that we try to give that to them. Obviously, a lot of these dates are out in the future, but it gives folks the ability to plan, knowing what our plan is as a village. So I'm glad the staff is bringing this forward at this point, and I'm hopeful that all these dates far into the future are good ones. Thank you.
Thank you, Greg. Anyone else?
Are we discussing all of them or one at a time?
We're discussing them kind of all at one time. I think Marge, you had something?
Oh, I was just wondering if the village will be contacting those people. That's all, the license, for the license renewals, and letting them know the dates. I assume that was a yes. Thank you, Enzo.
Yeah, that's a good question. It's part of why we're talking about this now, because that process to lead up to that takes a little bit of time to accomplish. Rich?
Okay, my comments. First of all, I'm pleased that we're doing this. Secondly, The restaurant owners have a lot of catch-up to do. Some of them put huge capital expenditures, and their revenues were down pretty significantly. So this is giving them the opportunity to play catch-up. So I would trust that we would engage in discussions around making this semi-permanent, and then determining if any parking changes have to be made in deference to other retail shops that may want some of their spots back. The other thing, in talking to some restaurant owners, and an idea that surfaced that I can support, is the idea that if somebody's in one establishment and they want to walk through Downers Grove, that they would be able to get a Go Cup and actually have and consume an alcoholic beverage on the street, as long as it was consumed within the downtown business district. And the idea to enforce that is to have a special cup that's logoed specifically, where somebody would not have a red Solo cup and be walking, specifically have a unique logo that would be limited to that, and then they would have to either finish it or dispose of it. What they like about the idea is the whole idea of someone leaving downtown is giving them an opportunity to hang out there, go to other places, perhaps that it's frequent shops that are there as well. So I think we should discuss that and entertain that as a possibility.
I agree with you, Rich. Those are ideas, those are amongst the list of ideas that came partly through the EDC's COVID-19 task force, and those are in the process of being queued up for our consideration. What we're dealing with tonight here are sort of updates and intended end periods to the executive orders that were issued earlier. We're dealing with just sort of the temporary changes we made and trying to, as Greg said, put some certainty to them.
And I intend to support this.
Thank you. Any other comments or questions? Okay, moving on.
Thank you. The final item on tonight's first reading agenda is consideration of an ordinance making certain technical amendments to the Downers Grove Municipal Code. There are no substantive changes to the code proposed here tonight. Several months ago, the village purchased a new software to help us manage our municipal code and regulations and place them on the website and manage them internally as well. Now that we've converted to that transition is completed, we've caught a couple of technical changes that need to be addressed just to make sure that new software system reflects the current code and what the council has in place as village policy. So I would call these changes housekeeping in nature, as there are no substantive changes to actual village code. And because there are none, I'll be happy to answer any questions you have.
Anyone have any questions? I'm glad we have the software. It's got to be helpful to everybody on the team.
Already helpful, thank you. That concludes tonight's first reading agenda. Thank you.
You're not off the hook that easy, Dave. Is there a manager report?
Immediately back off the hook, no report.
Oh, well played. Enza, that brings us to item 10, our attorney's report.
Thank you, Mayor. 5 items to present tonight. The first is an ordinance rezoning certain property located at 4725, 4733, 4737, 4744, 4809 Douglas, and 4445 Prairie for the St. Mary of Boston Parish Church and School. An ordinance adopting an institutional master plan for that property as well. Of an ordinance amending liquor license renewals and terms. An ordinance amending massage establishment license renewals and terms, and an ordinance making certain technical amendments to the Downers Grove Municipal Code. That is all. They will all be on next week's active agenda. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Enza. Item 11, our council member reports. This is an opportunity for council members to talk about things that are on their mind, professionally in their role here as council members and perhaps their engagement in the community. So we'll generally go down the line, and tonight we'll start with Rich.
I guess the only comment I would really encourage people to continue wearing the mask as they enter establishments where they can't do social distancing. This is still a nasty disease. I know there's some fatigue with all of this, but I think the better we do at voluntary compliance will prevent situations where we have reoccurrence that could set us back, and I think that would be devastating. So, and I also like to reiterate, these are not meant to protect the wearer nearly as much as they're meant to protect the other person. Mm-hmm. So I'm willing to continue giving up a little bit of my personal freedom in order to protect other people, because, I don't know, I could have picked up this disease today. So, that's all.
Thank you, Rich. Leslie?
Yeah, I just wanted to thank the village and especially the police department for the release of all the information. It took me a while to get through. And I'm really looking forward to the continued conversations with the community in the coming month. And just want to echo Rich with COVID-19 is still here. I know it's exhausting, just like he said, but stay outdoors when you can, and when you can't, socially distance, really please wear a mask. It is protecting everyone in the community. I know we all have people that we care about who are especially at risk, and their lives are important too.
Thank you. Nicole?
Thank you, Mayor. Briefly, school supply drive for Hope's Front Door. They've been doing this for the past several years. There is a drop-off at Evelyn Jane Boutique. They look for backpacks, binders, erasers. If you go to hopesfrontdoor.com or .org, you can find some more information or talk to a junior women's club member. They also have information regarding this as well. But as our kiddos head back to school in a way that we are very unsure of, and with the hard times that a lot of people have faced, these supplies are needed more than ever to make sure that our kids can make a successful journey back to the building in whatever way is decided. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you. Kavanaugh, anything for us this evening?
Yes, Mayor. I just wanted to thank the residents of the village of Downers Grove. Since we were here last time, I think there have been about 6 meetings that have been kind of in a collective or individually, where residents have really been interested in talking. They've been passionate, it seems like, around 3 main issues. The issues, rightfully so, of race and diversity, the community engagement with law enforcement, and then just policy changes that help us to function and operate better. And so I just want to thank everyone. It's been kind of a marathon of a couple of weeks, but just a lot of good engagement. And I'd like to encourage the residents to continue to do that amongst yourselves as well. It's been really helpful. Some of the dialogue that's come out of that has been super helpful. It's been really good to hear. It's been enlightening. It's been educating for a lot of people involved. And lastly, for me, just want to echo the sentiments of everyone else. It's been a little disheartening to see states that have taken these huge leaps backwards. Watching this on the news has been painful and hard. And I just want to encourage everyone to continue to do their part. It's hard, it's long, it's drawn out, but it's for the betterment of everyone. So thank you for everyone that's doing that. Thank you, Mayor.
Marge?
Commissioner Wallace and I actually had the pleasure last week of talking with somebody who was stuck in the COVID crisis right as it was emerging in Italy. And it was truly frightening to hear some of the things that they had to go through, not just to get back to the States, but what was happening to the people in Italy at the time, how you got the first initial of your last name dictated what day you could go to the grocery store. You had a 2-hour window. You had to give your phone number and register yourself. You had 2 hours in that grocery store, and that was it for the week. You were done. Get back home and get back in your house. And all the time you're out, you're covered by a mask. The stories were horrifying. What the people went through and are still going through in some cases was just horrifying. And wearing a mask in public here is nothing compared to what they had to go through. We don't want that. So please, please wear your mask when you're in public and stay at least 6 feet away from people, and try to do your best to stay home until we get some better treatments and till we get a vaccine. And we need to stay safe and compliant of our own free will. That way we don't have to live through the really difficult stuff or have us make those really difficult choices for you. We don't want to do that. We don't want to be that kind of authoritarian society. That's why we're here. So please, just asking nicely, please, for everybody, wear a mask. Thank you.
Thank you, Marge. Craig?
Thank you, Mayor. I'm going to go ahead and run the risk of repeating what's already been said, but please wear your mask. We all came in wearing them tonight. and we'll be wearing them as soon as this is over and we're away from some of our plexiglass that was recently installed.
I'm taking this with me.
And thank you to staff for that. I think my wife might like it if I brought this with me. But it is, as Commissioner Colavani noted, a terrible disease. It unfortunately has afflicted a client who's become a friend. And I was texting with him just the other night, and he's in the hospital. The coworker that was diagnosed at the same time of his, fortunately, has been largely asymptomatic. To that particular person, it was basically a bad cold, but it's got this friend of mine now flat on his back at Northwestern Memorial, and it goes to show you that, as Commissioner Colavani noted, this doesn't necessarily protect you, but it protects everybody else. And you don't know, if you end up spreading it to somebody, how they're going to end up being affected by it. So if you're out there, if you're listening and skeptical on it, please wear it. It's for the benefit of everybody. Thank you, Mayor.
Thanks, Greg. I had a few comments prepared that I'm going to go ahead and go through because although they are repetitive, it's that important. The work done by Downers Grove and DuPage County to adjust how we go about our daily lives has been helpful to the goal of slowing the spread of COVID-19. The masks that we're talking about, the distancing that we're talking about, it has been helpful. Of that, there is no doubt. Data available from DuPage County Health Department yesterday suggests daily new cases are down from a high of over 300 a day to less than 10 a day. Positivity results, similar fashion, down from a high of over 36% in March to 4% now. Deaths, too, have fallen from a high of 13 per day in April to 0 the last 2 days. That's a lot of good news. It's something we should all be proud of, but it is a result of the actions and behaviors we have all engaged in. The distancing, the masks, the hand washing. Nonetheless, as I mentioned the last time we met, COVID-19 is not going away anytime soon. Those deaths won't stay at 0. They just won't. And every step we take towards something we consider to be normal or the way it was carries with it additional risk. The fundamental idea that recognizing the capacity limits of our healthcare system should compel us to take extraordinary precautions remains the task we all need to be focused on. Wash your hands, wear your mask, minimize interactions with those outside your household, stay away from crowds, and get tested. Yes, it's repetitive. Yes, it's exhausting or tiring. It's also exactly the right thing to do, which is why you heard 7 folks up here talk about it, and you'll continue to hear us, because it is critical that we all continue this path. Friends, family, neighbors, coworkers, coaches, servers, employees at local businesses, people you know and interact with, as Greg just told us, will become infected. New infections will be part of our lives for quite some time, so getting tested when you think you may have been exposed is critical. Not only to slow the spread and take quick action if necessary, but to give yourself and your family some peace of mind. If you know you've been with somebody who's been exposed, get yourself tested, sort it out. So before we close this evening, I want to remind folks again that the Downers Grove and the DuPage County Health Department continue to operate drive-in COVID-19 testing at the DuPage County Complex in Wheaton. All residents of DuPage County can be tested with no appointment, no doctor referral, and no insurance. Tuesday through Saturday, 7 a.m. to 3 p.m. It's just a drive-up test. And the county continues to support a remote testing site in Willowbrook, which is available through August. This site is drive-up testing also. It's at Ann M. Jeans Elementary School in Willowbrook. The site is operated by appointment only. That's a little different than the county site. So to make an appointment, call 708-745-5277. 708-745-5277. I've probably been asked 30 times in the last 2 weeks about testing opportunities. And that's great because it's encouraging that people want to get tested. Keep it up. Do the right things. Get yourself tested. Any of the information that we talked about tonight is available on the DuPage County Health Department website at dupagehealth.org. So please continue to be safe, wear your mask, make good choices, and help us all keep minimizing the risk. I got a text earlier. I'm assuming it is still true, but I'm going to double check before we close. Were there any electronic comments or remarks received during the meeting?
No additional comments.
Thank you, Mike. So with that, is there a motion to adjourn?
Mayor, I move that we adjourn.
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? We are adjourned. Thank you all and good night.